Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. We're here live on Tuesday night. If you're used to watching at this time, I have a little information for you that this will be our last show live on Tuesday night. In future, starting next week, we're moving to Thursday night at 8 p.m. But many of you watch this show on delay or when it's repeated at other times during the week. But this is our last live show after 2.5 years or so of being here every Tuesday night, and we appreciate you who check in, etc. Let me say at the outset, if you've missed it, I announced last week that after all this time that I'm going to be running for the school board in Manchester. I've put in my paperwork to be a candidate for the school board at large, and I look forward to earning your vote. And those of you who've known me for a long time, I think or watched this program for numerous times, you have a pretty robust understanding of who I am and what I stand for and the things that I believe in, and I promise you that won't change if I find myself at the other side of the desk at the City Hall. I'll be very privileged and honoured and humbled to be your candidate. Let me just grab a quick call before we announce others. Go ahead, caller. Do we miss the caller?
Hey, Jim.
Hello. Yes. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim, good luck and congratulations and all, and becoming a citizen and all that. And good luck with your campaign.
Is that Ed? Is that Ed?
Yes, it's Eddie, yeah.
Okay, Ed. Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, great. Hey, listen, I want to ask you a few questions if I could. Just a few quick ones.
If you could, and I'd be happy to answer them. I've got a bunch of people in the studio who've come with us tonight to ask questions, but I'd be happy to have yours.
Here we go. We talk about city-side spending. I know you're an advocate for school-side spending. Do you have any input on, say, the tentative contracts for the city-side unions? Of course, the point being, every dollar they spend on the city side, that they have to spend on the school side. So go ahead with that.
So I'm not normally a punter, but I'm going to punt on that, simply because I haven't looked at it. I don't know what's in those contracts. I did see you mention them on social media, but I just don't know. But obviously, there's a tension between how scarce resources are distributed in the city. So I take that point. What's the next one?
Well, actually, there's very little tension. They get their contract one after another. There's very little.
And the schools don't. You're right. What else do we have?
Yeah. Okay, how about closing down a school building, like maybe Central High School or part of Central High School, maybe West? Any input on closing down a building?
Yeah, I think we're a long way away from there. I think that, when you've gone through a period of a decade or more of cutting, eliminating staff, etc., when people look at excess space in our school district today, I've used the analogy many times that, if you fire enough teachers, you'll have an awful lot of empty classrooms. When we fired 160 teachers 6 or 7 years ago, we pretty much freed up 160 classrooms, or maybe half of that, but we freed up a lot of them. So if you go to a school that's got 90 kids in 5th grade, and you decide you're going to have 45 kids in each class, where most people would have 4 classes of 22, guess what? You got 2 empty classrooms. And then you could have citizens saying, why do we have excess capacity in our buildings? I would suggest to you, Ed, that the real problem is that it is a disgrace that in the city of Manchester, we've got the least number of teachers per student of any city in the great state of the United States, the great state of New Hampshire. That's the place I would start with. And then I wouldn't start cutting any. My expectation is that Manchester is a city that's going to be dynamic, that's going to continue to grow, and I'd like to be preparing for that growth and not accepting downsizing. So what's the next one, Ed?
Well, the last one's more of a comment, I suppose, okay?
Yeah.
And I look forward to hearing what you have to say, Jim, and I hope it's more than we need more funding. I'm going to follow your campaign, and I hope that you have more to say than that. And that's all, and good luck. I'll hang up now because I know you're pressed.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the call. You're always welcome here.
Right,
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
So that's Ed, who calls in from time to time, and somebody who pays attention to city politics and to the city. And absolutely, it's not all about money for sure. But we do have to face the fact that we've had the state of New Hampshire downsizing and passing down costs to the taxpayers. $8 million a year since in the last 6 years has been passed down by the state of New Hampshire on an annual basis to the city of Manchester. $8 million, ladies and gentlemen, if you're paying attention. Roughly 20 teachers per million. So do the math, right? If you had 20 teachers per million and you've got $8 million, that's 160 teachers. If you use it all for teachers, you could use it for technology, for modernizing buildings, etc. But that's a huge amount of money that if they simply stop the cutting, that wouldn't happen. I want to move on tonight because it's an exciting night here at our program Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by a bunch of Manchester young people. Bunch isn't the best word to use, I suppose, but we have. I'm very. I mean honoured, because people say that often, But I'm thrilled. I'm very happy, and I'm honoured. I think it's a great thing. I'm a big fan of having student voices heard in the community and heard loudly and clearly. And I'm a great believer in civic activism, as you all know, because that's why I come here on Tuesday nights. I'm passionate about education. And the fact that we have such wonderful young people in the city of Manchester, and I'm joined by a bunch of them here tonight. And I'd have you know, I'm going to have three of them that are sitting here with me introduce themselves, but there's an equal number sitting behind the cameras managing social media and Instagram, and I'm very grateful to them, and we'll give them a shout out in a minute. But the other young men and women who are here working with us, I appreciate it. But here on camera, I'm delighted to have three either current or former Manchester School District students. So I'm going to start with the gentleman on my right. Eamon, would you like to introduce yourself to the folks?
Good evening. I'm Eamon Ryan. I'm going to be a senior at Manchester High School Central. And I'm here because I believe that we need to be more aware of what our school board does and who we're putting on that school board. And as young people in Manchester, we need to know what we're doing. We need to know how we can help make real change in our schools. And I'm here to wonder if Jim can do that for us.
All right, thank you, Emma. We'll try and prove that I can do that. Next, we have Lily. Lily, welcome, and if you'd like to introduce yourself to the folks at home.
My name is Lily Russo, and I am a graduate of West High School. I just graduated this past year, and I will be attending the University of New Hampshire for music education. And I am here because as a future teacher, hopefully in Manchester, I would like to see change happen so that I can implement goals that I have for the future.
Wonderful, great, welcome, Lily. Thank you for coming. And next to Lily, we have Lydon. Lydon, welcome. If you want to introduce yourselves and let us know who you are and why you're here.
All right. Hi, my name's Lydon Philbrook from Ward 2, go to Central, and I'm going to be a senior next year. And I'm here because, well, Jim's one of my neighbors around the block, and we have a lot of fun in Ward 2, and we all like to make sure that these schools keep running like they have in the past.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I'm delighted to have you here. I was telling those of you maybe on social media who caught it earlier might have seen, I was mentioning that when I first, I haven't been involved in politics per se as a politician in 30 years or more. But when I was a young man, which wasn't yesterday, I was 17 years old when I first began my journey as being involved in political campaigns. And that was, we were trying to do something about issues like homelessness and child poverty and things back in my home country of Ireland at that time. Anyway, I've always been a great believer in that. And over the last, my 27 years in Manchester, I've lived here. The last probably 15 of those, I've spent a lot of time talking about education. I've had this show for the last couple of years. I was president of the PTO at Hillside Middle School for 6 or 7, I think 6 years. I've been involved in lots of community efforts, and as a soccer coach and a baseball coach and many other things. And I was president for Citizens of Manchester Schools, and I could go on with I'll try to avoid the sentences starting with I all the time. I would like people to know, though, that I have resigned just this past week from the Manchester Proud organising committee in honour of the fact that that's an apolitical organisation working. But I'm very excited for the work they're going to do. So let me throw it over to you guys. Who's going to start us with a question?
I'll start off.
Okay.
So, as young people in our schools, we often talk about things that we don't like in our schools, things that we want to change. Why should we care about? Is that a reason why we should care about what the school board does?
Yeah, yeah. So, it's funny that there's a disassociation sometimes between like a political body like the school board and sort of going to school every day and what you think. you think sometimes it's difficult to see the link between what the teacher come in prepared in the morning, going through going through the topic in a professional way, you managing your school life and doing your homework and planning your futures and all that stuff, and it's hard to see what levers are being pulled in the background, and some are more obvious, right? In the winter time, who's plowing the snow, etc., right? And who's keeping the lights on. Well, the school board should be, it's not always, but it should be, it's a policy making body, right? So there are 14 members of the school board plus the mayor currently, so each one of the 12 wards, and then there are 2 at-large positions that represent the whole city. I'm running for one of those 2 at-large positions, and it's a 2-year cycle. People are elected for 2 years. But to answer your question, everything that had all the policy in the school, if you wanted to change the policy about, I know an issue at Central High School and at West and at the other MST and Memorial, that there were issues about access to after hours to the library and school resources, and there's a whole discussion about transference from library to a media center. But if you wanted that to change, that could be a policy that the school board could say, as a matter of policy, we're going to make sure that librarians are funded through the 5 p.m. hour or the 6 p.m. hour, and libraries will be open for students to study and whatever and meet and things in those hours. That's a policy that could be proposed by any of you as an individual citizen, as students. It could go to committee and then would be voted on by the school board, and the school board will decide that. So that's a very that's not the most important point about it, but the school board actually decides when the schools open, when they close, how long the school year is, what subjects are taught, and does all the hiring and firing. There's a lot of, or approves the hiring and firing. So,
Thank you.
what's next?
Sure, I'll go. Do you see yourself primarily as a representative of the school system or as a representative of our community?
So first of all, as a representative, my first job will be to represent the students, the families, and the teachers of the City of Manchester. I'm an unwavering advocate of a great public education system, and the public underlined, freely available to all citizens, a quality education, and that's born of my long-held view that we talk about pulling levers to make change. If you want to change a society, if you want to improve it, you can spend money on legal system, you can spend it on police system, you can spend it on welfare programs, you can spend it, but you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of just money in education. And my first concern isn't money. My first concern is that every young person in the City of Manchester have an opportunity to grow into the person that they are capable of being. And we as a community should be doing everything we can to make that happen. So absolutely, I am not a systems guy. I'm not owned by anybody. I don't have any obligations to any groups. I'm not going there with an agenda to sort of push one thing or another. My first consideration at all times will be what is in the best interest of the public schools of the City of Manchester, and I will fight all day, every day for that. Okay? All right, who's next?
Great, I've got a question right here.
Just one? I doubt that. This is
All right, so one question is, what is your own experience with the Manchester School District, and how has that affected you and your family?
All right. Well, that's, the problem, people who know me know that I usually fill up this program. It's a whole hour. And somebody throws me like a carrot at the very start and asks me a question, I just follow that thing and run all over the road with it. And some of the other people, the young people here with me tonight, have said, well, let's try and get more than one question answered. So, but that's a great question because there's a lot to it. But let me be as succinct as I can be, which is a challenge for me. But first of all, of course, I have 4 children. My beautiful wife, Kathy, and I've got 4 children, Molly, Liam, Lily, and Aidan, all of whom are 3 of them are products of the Manchester public school system, and my youngest son Aidan is going to be a senior at Central High School this year. So my oldest daughter just graduated college. The other 2 are home for the summer, so I'm delighted to have them at home. But they're all products of the Manchester school system, so they've been through it. I've seen the best of what Manchester school system can do. And when each of my kids have graduated, and I've gone back to their schools, to the original schools like the middle school, and to teachers back through the grades at high school. And I've tried to make a point of thanking them because in the end, the first thing is each one of my kids who've gone through the system, the first credit for what they've achieved is theirs, right? They're the ones who actually did the work. It's their achievement first. And then, as a parent, I'll take my, whatever that percentage is, 2, 5, 3, you can argue with them on any, but whatever that number is, right? But obviously I've got some teachers, and the school system have a huge influence on that. And I don't know which teacher touched each of my kids in what way at any time to make them better, to give them a love of learning, whatever it was, but I know it happened. So I'm grateful to the Manchester School District for that. And I mentioned having been involved in PTO and Manchester Proud and being the president of Citizens for Manchester Schools, and lots of advocacy, lots of meetings, lots of talking, lots of organising. But as part of that, I've recognised the trajectory that we've been on, right? We were not, 10 or 15 years ago, Manchester did not have the largest class sizes in the state. We weren't the least well-funded school system in the state of New Hampshire. We got to there slowly, like Chinese water torture, a little drip at a time. Sometimes we made a few lurches, but the direction has been wrong. And it was pointed out, the caller, that when Ed pointed out tonight, this story that went out, the first time there was ever mentioned publicly in the city of Manchester or any public forum anywhere, was we had a former alderman who, resigning from his seat because he didn't stay for the full term because he moved himself and his family out of town. And right after he left town, he came on a public television program here and then wrote a piece to the newspaper saying, isn't it time we shut down, we've got to talk about shutting down schools. And that's a lovely parting gift. And so we've had long history in Manchester of people coming on school boards of mayor and aldermen, coming in what I would say, not to be controversial, but doing the dirty deed, helping with the cutting, with the downsizing, with they don't really need that. And then as soon as it comes their turn, they take their money and their kids, and they move off to a surrounding town. I've seen that's the other part to your question. So with all the wonderful things we've seen there, I've seen my kids have to do VLAX, not because VLAX is the worst thing in the world. It's actually quite a nice thing to have as an additional something, right? But in your core subjects, that you can't have a teacher in the room that you can reach to and say, "Excuse me, Miss Jones, what did Hemingway mean by this?" Right? That you have to wait until tonight to do it overnight. So I've seen that. So I'm going in there to. We're starting. We have reached. I'm hoping we reached a nadir. That's a fancy word for the lowest point, right? Everybody thinks of zenith as the highest point. The nadir is the opposite one. A little bit of teaching got on here for a second. I'll try and resist that. But I hope we reached a nadir in the last couple of years, and that we're growing. I'm not satisfied at the rate at which we're growing, and we ought to be growing. But fundamentally, we need to convince some citizens that growing is what we need to be doing. All right, I'm ready for the next question. Do we have any more questions, or will we just call it a night? We could sit and, you're all musical guys too, right? Or something else. We could sing a few songs. I'm Irish. I can do a few. The people on Facebook Live might know this. Some of the folks from back in the way, they're like, if Jim starts singing, we're all shutting down right now before the chandeliers break. Go ahead, Lily. Do you have something?
Sure, I have more. Yeah. So, is membership on the school board compatible with what your current positions that you currently have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. The most direct one is, I was very privileged and very happy to be chosen to be on the community planning group, which is the planning group of Manchester Proud. This effort that's going on in our city, which is a wonderful example for at last the city business has stepped in, the Chamber of Commerce, philanthropic interests, the universities, Southern New Hampshire University and the University of New Hampshire, and lots of groups, parent groups, just a whole wide range across section of Manchester communities come together in the last year and a half or so, and they're deconstructing and examining what's going on in Manchester schools and saying trying to divine what should happen next. And I was very happy to be part of a group. I think it's a committee of 28 or 29 that was getting a lot of that information being brought in. But because it's a very apolitical group, because when they go to the next stage of actually saying this is what we think we should do, it's important that no person in the city says, oh, that's a conservative group, that's a liberal group, that's a progressive group, that's an anarchist group, that's an Irish group, that's an O'Connell group. We don't want any of that. So in honor of that, I sadly, last week, Barry Brensinger, who's the person, there's a lot of people behind Manchester Proud, but the public face of it is a gentleman by the name of Barry Brensinger, who's been doing Trojan work and devoted probably a substantial part of his life to the effort in recent years. So I did announce that I would be withdrawing from that group, so I am. The other thing is about the compatibility. I think it's important. I mentioned that, I have 4 children, and they've been my first priority, or a very important priority. No, my wife's the first priority. I think she might be listening. My wife's definitely the first priority. Okay. Woo, I think I got away with that. We might have to do an edit. We might have to do an edit later. But they're a very high priority of mine. And so one of the reasons why I didn't become involved in, and there were many reasons, but one of the reasons for not running previously was because my first commitment was to my family, and I was doing community advocacy work, but I thought that. So I now find myself with my youngest son, who's a very capable young man, who's going to be a senior, and not that if he's watching, he thinks that I'm going to be hands off completely, but I think he's like ready to leave the nest, So that timing wise, I also have divested myself of other things. I was the president of Manchester North Soccer League for a number of years, and on the board for many years. And a couple of years ago, I resigned from that, and then some of the other organisations I was sort of offloading my commitment and time. And so I have the time commitment. I certainly have the interest. With all humility, I've spent a lot of time, at meetings, talking to people, talking to teachers, talking to principals, talking to students, talking to families, and I've learned the word humility is important here. I've learned that the complexity of the system, right, almost $200 million enterprise with 14,500 students, 2,200 teachers and staff, with 22 schools, some of them multiple buildings. That's a pretty complex, and there's a lot of complex things happening in there. So I like to think that one of the things I can bring to the citizens of Manchester, if they vote for me, and I hope they do, is that I hit the ground running. And I'm not going to, there's going to be very little honeymoon period for me, because I know I still have a lot to learn, but I've spent a lot of time learning. I'm a little slow, but if you keep repeating it long enough, I do get it. All right. Next, Eamon.
So when you, if
Let's go with when. Let's go with when.
Let's go with when.
I'll be modest. You don't have to be. Go ahead. So when I'm elected, yeah.
So when you're elected,
and then I'll correct you and say if and all that.
Or if, when, or if.
And everybody's listening, but nobody heard that.
How do you plan to connect with the members of the community in the schools?
Well, my first thing is I'm trying to learn to speak more often and learn to speak publicly, because I'm not very good at it, and I don't know how to put 2 words together. I'm just being a little silly. So.
I was going to say.
I think the biggest thing is, everybody knows I can talk, so we'll see how well I listen, right? That's going to be very important. Because in the end, I'm not going there to implement some Jim O'Connell master vision of the Manchester schools. I distrust, I was going to say dislike, but let me use a different word. I distrust people who oftentimes, after just a perfunctory look or little knowledge, or sometimes, and often, this happens more often, from a particular wedge, their particular experience of their child, especially if it was unfortunate with something that happens in a school, and they use that and extrapolate it out to sort of represent, I'm going to fix the problem, because now their one little piece of experience informs them of everything else. So I don't have this unified vision of this is where we need to go. I'm very convinced, and I know, I'm a big academic guy. I mean, I love the music program, I love the arts program, I love sports curriculum, I love robotics. I think extracurriculars are extremely important. I will fight and to maintain those. We do not want to go where other communities have gone outside of the state, often where they've gone pay to play, where basically if you can afford to do it, you can do it. That would be a terrible thing for Manchester, even though it's been whispered about by some of the people who talk about right after they're finished downsizing the schools, we'll have some more of that. I am convinced, and I think all of us should. It's obvious, I think, that education in the 21st century, which we're now substantially into, it's no longer like a new thing. Ooh, we're ready for the 21st century. We were supposed to be ready like 25 years ago to give us a 4-year start, right? So 4 or 5 year start. So we're into the 21st century. You guys are going to be living your working lives through the substantial part of the 21st century. I hope, as seniors and as a recent graduate, I hope the Manchester School District is not getting ready to talk about the 21st century, but has actually prepared you for it. And I worry about that sometimes. But I see I go into universities and I see and other colleges and community colleges, and I see the young people there who are this misconception out in the world that young people today aren't interested, aren't prepared, aren't well educated or ready to do it. Nonsense. Go to any software company anywhere in the United States today and walk into one of their cafeterias or into one of their conference rooms, and there's a bunch of 25 to 35-year-olds who would knock your socks off. And you're probably ready to do that right now, or if not, you'll be ready in a couple of years when you come out of college. So I'm going into the school district, into the Manchester School District to do a number of things. First of all, there's a certain dysfunction, might be too strong a word, but I think that there's a lack of focus on behalf of the school board. I think they're micromanaging, they're involved in pettiness often, there's unimportant conversations happen at school boards. I've been CEO of a couple of companies in my life, and that kind of, board meetings are businesslike, and they are succinct, and they're to the point, and they're executive sessions. They're not rambling sessions. People don't fly in from around the country, busy executives of other companies come to a board meeting to listen to Johnny the Loudest ramble on about what he saw on the golf course last week. So I'd like the school board meetings to be shorter, more businesslike. I'd like them to get out of the micromanagement, stick with policy, allow the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the administrators and the principals to do their job, and thereby allow the teachers, empower the teachers to do their job. I'm a big teacher advocate, and I think they are generally under-respected in our society writ large, and in Manchester in particular, and certainly when it comes to the way in which we compensate them, we can see that that's the case.
And just going to cut in there.
Well, please jump in, and we'll be here all night. It does finish at 7 for anybody who's paying attention. Go ahead.
So when you say that you're a big advocate, when you're a big advocate for the teachers,
Yeah.
Do you want to discuss like teacher contracts, especially?
Yeah. I'd be happy to do that, yeah. So anybody who's paying attention to Manchester School District knows that we've got an issue that has now gone on. It's not just this current issue, it's gone on for a number of years. So teachers have signed, most recently they signed a 3-year contract, which is now almost 2 years since that contract ran out, 1.5 years. So our teachers are without a contract. We're heading into the 7th year. Out of the last 7 years, Manchester school districts have teachers and other staff, but let's talk about teachers. It gets complicated. We talk about secretaries, and it's important to know that there are more than just teachers, right? Because there's a group, the principals and vice principals, and there's administrators, there's other staff, and we have janitorial staff. We have lots of staffs, but let's talk about teachers. That's the largest group. So they have not had a contract they only had a contract for 3 out of the last almost 7 years, 6.5 years. And during that time, we have moved from a place where Manchester, it was unheard of really for teachers to sort of up and leave Manchester mid-career. You know, once you were in and once you got through those first couple of years and you moved up a little bit, well, the whole contract is sort of designed and you get step increases, right? So every year in your first number of years, you get a step increase. So by the time you're there a number of years, you're like, well, if I give up now, I don't want to start something, so they stay. Well, we've had the sad realization in Manchester in recent years that we have teachers actually leaving. I didn't look up the numbers for this show for this week, but for the last week I did. And the last week there were more than 90 empty teacher positions in the city of Manchester. And principals told me last week they were still receiving resignation letters. So 90. And you think about it, you know, most teachers who want a job starting for 6 weeks' time have found a job. If you want to find the best math teacher for, you know, 3rd grade in the state of New Hampshire, he or she probably has their job right now. They're not waiting around for Manchester to decide what's going on. So we have a real issue with that. And there's the actual numbers. You know, everybody on the board of Mayor and Alderman was very excited that they passed a budget with $2.5 million extra in it that is kind of earmarked towards teachers. Well, you know, I want to say thank you if they're listening. Thank you guys for doing that, and ladies, that's great, but it isn't good enough. right? Because what it represents actually is, it's easy math, right? We have about 2,500 or 2,200 teachers and then other staff, but let's just call it, round off the numbers. 2,500 staff with $2.5 million, it's $1,000 per year per person. That's $20 a week, that's 50 cents an hour. And we have public representatives in Manchester, some of whom I'll be running against, who think they're all excited they did that, and they're going to get ready to do it again in about 8.5 years when they pucker up their bravery, and they want us all to be kowtow and bend in front of them and bow down and say thank you very much for breaking the supposed tax cap and finding this extra $2.5 million. I'm a taxpayer in Manchester. I don't want to pay an extra dime. If I don't have to. But also, if I were a teacher in Manchester, I would be insulted after all this time to be given 50 cents an hour. I know in private enterprise, if you went to a software company, you went to a hospital, you went to a school, you went to any business, other than the most basic of jobs at sub minimum wage, and you hand somebody, a professional, 50 cents an hour, most people would walk out on you and say, you obviously don't value us. To answer your question, otherwise, I would say this. My aim, it's easy to get lost in the numbers and say, well, they should go up by 2%, down by 1%, health should go up by this and not by that. They should have, I like to strip all that away. That's a job for a human resources specialist. That's I'm a smart guy, I can read papers. But for me, where I come at it is this. I want Manchester schools to be able to offer a compensation package, so divide it any way you want. Health, retirement, pay, benefits, any way you want. But the retirement package as a whole is sufficient that we can attract top quality teachers to the city of Manchester. That should be the aim. And then I would allow others to decide where the line should be within that number and how they change over time, etc. But we should, Manchester has significant needs, and so we've got, let me say one more thing and I'll throw it back to you. Anybody who looks at it as though there's a problem with getting great teachers to come to Manchester because we have diverse population, we've got the highest free and reduced lunch in the state, we've got the highest minorities in the state and all that stuff. I flip that on its ear. You talked about going to be a teacher, Lily, and we haven't talked about this before, but I want to say it to you. The way I think any teacher with real ambition, a young person who's going into the teaching profession, they don't want to teach in some little house in the prairie, wonderful white picket fence, everybody showing up, excuse me, miss, would you mind if you sign my... that's not what you want to teach for, right? You want to teach kids, you want to help them, you want to bring them forward, you want to see them grow, you want to see the excitement in their faces, you want to affect their lives. There isn't a place in New Hampshire better to do that than in the city of Manchester. If I was out recruiting teachers, I'd be leading with that. I say, you want to be a teacher? You're a new teacher coming out of college? Let me show you the work you can do. Let me bring you to our schools. I'll show you places where you can make a real difference every day, going home saying, you know what I did today? I helped another young man or woman. That's the future of Manchester. That's the possibility of Manchester. But we have to get past this idea of a small group of noisy people running down Manchester, running down our ability to have great schools, saying our best days are behind us. We got to, like we heard tonight, we got to prepare. We should close something down. Let's reduce something else. Nonsense. Push that all out of the way. Let's move forward, drive forward. I'm excited for Manchester's future. I want to be part of Manchester's future, and that's why I'm running. So I'm sorry I speechified a little bit, but you get me. I am passionate about these things. So, all right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Did you think of anything to say? There's a lot of stuff out there. I'll throw some back at you if you want. By the way, folks, the call-in number is 640-3091. If you're out of state, the number is area code 603-640-3091. This program is repeated numerous times, not for those of you watching online. You can watch it anytime you want, which is either a very good or a very bad thing. But on local television here, it's carried 7 or 8 times during the week, and sometimes when people watch it, they may think they're watching live. So if you're watching a recording of this, it's live on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. and about to change. So where are we? Go ahead.
As a student who will be moving to Durham in the fall,
Yep.
and myself being eligible to vote,
Yeah.
what would you say to students like myself who have resided in Manchester for their public education and are now moving on to something bigger?
Right. So first of all, as a student at UNH, you can retain your if your home base is here, because I presume you'll come back to your family home from time to time and report in, and so your domicile would be here, and therefore you're eligible to vote in the state of in the city of Manchester, and of course the state of New Hampshire. And even those who are going to be, many students like you are going to be leaving us in about 3 weeks, and some a little earlier and heading off. This is an important point here, that absentee ballots. It's now, if you go to manchesternh.gov or just Google the Manchester City website, and you go to there's a tab under the city clerk's office, and for elections. And now you don't even have to go to City Hall to get your absentee ballot application. You can download it online. You can actually fill it out and scan it and send it back. I don't think it's a writable, editable PDF. I think you may have to actually print it out, fill it out, and then but you don't even have to go back. You can scan it and send it back. For those of you who are still on snail mail, we'll be explaining this next week in a class called We're Now in the 21st Century. Sorry. So that's very important, if you're not going to be here, and especially if there's a chance, if you're going to be at UNH, things get busy. You'll have classes, you'll have things going on. There's a lot of exciting things at UNH, lots of extracurricular activities, lots of duties, lots of things. And you may not be able to physically come back here and vote. Your vote is gold. Votes for young people, especially young people, sadly, I guess they're busy, and we talked earlier about the disconnect between sort of seeing how it affects their lives every day and have you vote. But especially like in the primary, which is on September 17th, people in Manchester get elected on the small, like the just silly numbers. And there are certain people, the chattering class, and I'm maybe one of those, having been doing this for a long time now. The chattering class votes, right? The people who have, strong opinions about, I'm going to hold the line, and those young brats today are all spoiled and they don't need any more. When I was in school, we had a coal fire with one lump of coal in it, and we walked uphill and back every day, and we were all barefoot, and damn it, it's good enough for all of us. Those people vote. They do. And by the way, if you're out there listening, folks, I really want you to vote for me too, because I do remember being in a schoolhouse where we didn't have coal. But I actually was in a schoolhouse where we had pens with ink, and we had to fill up the ink when the nuns made sure we didn't get it out on our fingers, and if we did, we got into all kinds of trouble. So I can identify with you, and we'll go. And actually, can I take a moment here to say this? There's a wonderful gentleman. There are lots of great people in Manchester's history, and I'm a history buff. I like history a lot. I'm becoming part of it, I hope, by being elected to the school board. But there's a man by the name of Bill Cashin, who is a person who deserves great respect in the city of Manchester. He's the longest serving alderman in the history of the city of Manchester. He served 16 terms. He's now a gentleman in his 80s. He lives in the west side of Manchester. And I have to tell you that I am, and I've said this now a couple of times about being honoured, etc., but I am particularly proud of the fact that Bill Cashin, the man who, if you go to the Centre for the Elderly on the west side of the city, the Cashin Centre, it's named after him. He's an important person in Manchester public life. And he has given me his unqualified endorsement and said that, he's asked me previously about running, etc. And he reached out to me once I announced and said that he was thrilled that I was running. And so I'm going to try and live up to his endorsement and to the implied trust that he has said by saying, go get him, go out there and do it, and use my name as much as you wish. So I'm grateful to Bill Cashin. If you're watching, Bill, as I told you to your face, I am humbled by that, and I take it seriously, and I will try to carry it forward. So. Those of you who weren't around when Bill was on the board, you can go Google him. That's the wonderful thing about Google today. You can do that.
21st century.
Yes, it is. Right. All right. What do we got? How are we doing for time here? We got 22 minutes or so. We're about a minute behind on the live, but that's fine. So, are we down to singing songs yet, or we have anything else to do here?
So I have a good question here. So cities across the country have integrated student and city life together, and you see artwork from the art program. You hear music downtown from the music department. Do you have any plans to make a hybrid of the Manchester community and our schools? And how would you go about doing that?
We should ask me that earlier. See, I knew we should have gotten the questions earlier. That would have been so. That's what a politician would have done, right? They would have said, line them up, and this is what I'm going to say, and if I said it. So, the first answer is I don't have a plan. That's the first answer. I don't have a plan for that. I said earlier on that I think it's important that, and I hope if this isn't responsive to your question, just to bring me back on track. But I think it's very important that an education appeal to people wherever they're at, and bring them from where they're at. And that while I, I'm a big, history, English literature, or American literature guy and other things, other people come at it from other places. That's why I mentioned robotics, I mentioned music, I mentioned art. When I was at Hillside Middle School, we, at one point, we fundraised. We did, rather than do fundraisers all the time, we used to have one big fundraiser every year. And I was with great help from a lot of the community, but we made a big impact there, bringing in some hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is a lot of it. That's right, folks, if you're listening. Some hundreds of thousands of dollars raised by parents in Manchester for their school, the great Hillside Middle School, which is as good as the other 4 middle schools, Parkside, McLaughlin, and Southside, just to make sure we're all on the same page, because we have people here from other parts of the city, and I don't want anybody to think this is, central to this area. But we fundraised for an oven. What's the right with the oven for baking the pottery, for a kiln? And the old kiln was terrible, and kids would make some pottery and then had to go in like 3 pieces at a time, and they'd see their work about a month and a half before they graduated. And so we bought the new thing, and it's just that's an idea. So. The idea is that the community, we should be reaching out into the community and doing more and more and more. There are a lot of things happening. The integration of schools and community, we see it a lot right now with sort of this involvement of private enterprise in schools, which is great, but it has its risks. I think there are places where we need to just be a little careful here. In the end, what you want, teaching you is you want a qualified teacher, hopefully a wonderful one, an inspiring one, an exciting one, somebody who wants to come to work every day. But you want them to pass on, be the best person for that job. We don't necessarily want, somebody who just, has done it once and they're going to show you how they learn to do it in their backyard. That's like teaching someone to be an electrician from, some guy who watched it on YouTube. So I think it's important that we go out into the community, in this regard, that there are lots of opportunities. We've seen the music program do it. I love to see like the jazz groups going out and playing at various places. That's exciting. At Christmas time, I go over to the mall in New Hampshire, and the bands from the schools or subsets of the bands from the schools are playing. I love to see that. I'd like to see it happen more and more. Sadly, our schools, many of them are old, and so they're historic and they're wonderful and they're valuable, but they're not always. They don't always lend themselves to having the community. Once you open the door at night time for people to come in, it's very hard to confine them, and so they don't lend themselves to sort of being a community centre. But I think we have a lot of money wrapped up in real estate in the school district that sort of shuts down at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there are lots of needs in our society, and so I'd love to see that, play with that area. But my first answer was I don't have a plan for that. But I'd love a group of young people or old people to sit around and say, hey, why don't we do this? Let me say one other thing just when I think about it. I think it's also important to realise who we are today. We're not the city we were 20, 30 years ago. We're not training mill workers, right? We're not, all our last names isn't O'Connell, or we're not all Greek or Italian or French Canadian or Irish. There are people here from lots of different places, and so our interests, our music department, our newspapers in our schools, the way in which we should be reaching out to people of other traditions, other ideas, and even people multi-generational American people who are sort of into something else, something different. I want to give you one. Hillside Middle School, you might remember this when you were there, Leiden. There was we had a class where we did DJs, right? So we the PTO bought what I call a desk, right? Do you like that? How he did that? I could be a rapper here. Yeah. Maybe I should forget the school board. I'm going to go live downtown. So anyway, I got to practice that. So we had 4 middle schoolers, learn, from an assistant teacher how to manage DJing, right? And then that grew to them actually, instead of bringing in an outside DJ, we had the students run the dance, and it was so exciting. So the following year, the school, the PTO, we financed some lights, and we had financed this deck so they'd have it. And so an announcement was made at the start of the following school year. Anybody who's interested in being part of the DJ class to learn to be a DJ, come to the cafeteria after school at 2:30. 65 students showed up to be DJs. and they had to be broken up into 4 classes in groups of 15 or something each, and they all learned to do this. And you go in there, I was in there after school closed in June, and there were people knocking on the door to come in just to play their. I'm glad we talked about this. Anyway, so that's just an idea like this. So that's just one little thing. But the point is, what are kids into? Let's meet them there. Education is a bigger thing than just the 3 R's.
So students from Candia and Hooksett also have the ability to come into Manchester for their education. How do you plan to kind of turn the tables a little bit to pull those students back in and, pull numbers from maybe, say, Pinkerton
Yes.
to our Manchester Public High Schools to try to inspire more growth?
That's a great question, and there's a long history there, and the first thing, it's very sad that they ever left in the first place. People vote with their feet, and people can talk all day about, when I say that our school system is under-resourced, undervalued, that we need to invest in it in terms of time and energy and money and everything. You look at the history, say, with Candia. Candia had been sending their students to Manchester for 150 years, or roughly close to 150 years. When they held the vote to leave the Manchester School District, they voted 93% to 7% to leave. And that's because politicians in Manchester, some of whom were still on the board, when they complained about the fact that there were children at Central High School who didn't have a seat to sit on, literally, no seat in the classroom, stand by the wall. And when the superintendent of schools, in this case the Hooksett superintendent of schools, came in and walked into to show the mayor school books being handed out in Manchester schools, which were tattered and torn and falling apart. And he was basically bullied out of the room and told, that he didn't know what he was talking about, and guess what? People walked out. For years, I listened to people here who didn't. I won't spend a dime, and they're all spoiled people. I listened to them for years saying that if we could only get, this sounds crazy nowadays to hear this, but this is only less than 10 years ago, where people said, if we could just get rid of the people from the surrounding towns, they're sucking all the life out of our school. They're costing us a fortune. Get rid of them. Well, they're gone now, right? People put their kids in buses in Hooksett, and they leave earlier in the morning, and the buses travel through Manchester, pass our schools like this, and drive to Pinkerton, to a 3,000+ person school, because of the way in which they were treated in Manchester. So the problem is a big one, because it took us a while to get into that problem. I think in the end, if we have great schools, then people will come to great schools. It isn't a marketing problem. It's we have to be able to offer value. Like if I go to Bedford tomorrow and I go to the high school and they've got a gifted and talented program. We don't have a gifted and talented program. So everybody thinks, and rightfully so, we all love our children. Little Mary, little Johnny's the smartest kid in North America, right? They all are. It's like, we see this in sports all the time. Like, you were a soccer guy, right? Dad and mom show up with the 4-year-old, and he's always a prodigy when he's 4. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She's the greatest soccer player. Johnny, she's 5. Calm down, man. Look how she kicks it. Well, parents can be a bit like that. So everybody, But if they look at the Manchester School District, we don't have a gifted and talented program. We don't have a baccalaureate program. We don't. If you go to Merrimack, in Merrimack High School, they teach Arabic. We don't teach Chinese. We eliminated middle school foreign languages for a substantial part of the last decade. We just brought them back last year. And the dirty little secret, of course, is that we have 2 Spanish teachers divided amongst 4 schools. So they spend as much time up and down Elm Street and back and forth, on Queen City Ave and Notre Dame Bridge as they do in the classroom. That's a slight exaggeration. But we have half a teacher in each of our middle schools. And if you do the math, they're just, if every kid at any of our middle schools wanted to do Spanish, they couldn't. There aren't enough hours in the day, and there aren't enough teachers. So we have part of a teacher. So we have a long way to go. And if we talk about magnet schools, is one of the things we talk about, special program. We've got MST that is doing wonderful work in some of the areas that it's doing. You go to West, and you've got the drama program at West, the ROTC. There are pockets of excellence in different schools. So I think in the end we need to lift our schools. If we have a great product, people are smart. They make smart decisions. And so I'm very open to that. I'd love to see that happening. But I think we do that by delivering, value here. It's also important to note that there are undervalued, yes, underserved populations in Manchester as well, across the board. But we have kids in need. We don't have alternative programs with kids with special needs, and there are all kinds of special needs. And it just is silly that we are putting kids in buses every day and sending them down to Massachusetts, even up to Maine, and paying for them to travel around the state to go to these different programs because we don't have a program here in the city. We could have such programs in the city. We could solve real problems in our schools, and we could also attract investment from outside communities by doing it. So there's a lot of work to be done, and those are the areas that the school board ought to be concentrating on and get the heck out of the classroom and, bothering teachers and principals and superintendents on the work that's rightfully theirs. I take full responsibility as a future board person to listen to the needs of people, listen to parents or students who have complaints about teachers or anybody else, and that's perfectly appropriate. But in the end, my job isn't to micromanage schools. I come from a long line of educators. I'm not one. So, all right, how are we? We're doing well.
Yeah.
Questions? Without questions, we're almost at that song time. Wow, I hope you're getting ready. Give me a C.
There we go.
This could get to be fun. So we talked about absentee ballots, if I could say this for a minute, because you brought that up. The absentee ballot thing is but the first step before absentee ballot, of course, is registering to vote. And this is especially true for seniors, right, in high school. Most of you guys are going to be... if you could look after our laptop right here, whoever's in charge of social media, we're after dropping off something here. So thank you, Eamon. So it's the first thing. A lot of our seniors are going to be turning 18 at this point, and you need to be registered to vote in order to vote, right? So thank you. That's one of our technical assistants. We got a great technical team here. I might bring before camera before we finish it all up, but. Anyway, so registering to vote is important, right? So people need to go out and register to vote in order to vote, and then the absentee ballot thing, and don't be, another thing that happens, I think, is that especially for young people, school board is where it's at, right? The mayor position, these are local elections, so there aren't any elections for presidents or congressional candidates or whatever else we have. We have elections in this cycle. Sometimes they might coincide, but now we have, in this cycle, it's for local elections, and a lot of people go in and they know who they want for mayor, and they check the box for mayor, and then they might think, well, my alderman, like mine is Will Stewart. I'm like, Will Stewart, here we go, So, and then they go, dinner time, I'm out of here, right? So the ballot matters, and in the case of you, and if you do the numbers, you can go. All these numbers are available online. If you go and look at them, and you'll see the numbers drop off as you go down through the positions. So school board doesn't get the same number of votes, as the aldermen do. Doesn't get the same number of votes as the mayor does. But in the end, the school board has a huge impact on your lives in the school. And let me extrapolate one place from there. It's important because this is fundamental to why the philanthropy and altruism of wanting to sort of help and bring young people forward. But there's a self-interest too. As a citizen of Manchester, it's important to realise that as Manchester goes, so goes the rest of the state. As Manchester schools go, so goes the city. Like, you cannot have a great city with all the wonderful things that are happening and the cranes that are building and buildings being building and exciting things going on in social life and in business, etc. You can't have a healthy and thriving city unless you have great schools. So and if you have great schools, guess what happens? Here's the self-interest piece. I happen to own a property. I pay property taxes as a result of that. People concentrate on the paying property taxes side, and rightfully so, because it's a check one has to write. But in the end, if you have great schools, you have an attractive city for property owners, and your property prices go up. And therefore, most people, I'll leave it to others to talk economics, but most people, their biggest investment in life, other than their wife and children, got it, is their house, right? And so the best way to increase the value of your house, you can paint it, you could do some yard work, I don't know, add a bathroom, or, if the city schools are thriving and the city's thriving, people want to come, and property prices will go up. So it's mostly altruism, but there's self-interest there as well. I'd like to say a couple of things. We've got 5 or 8 minutes, 5 or 7 minutes left, so we got a little bit. But I just want to say that to people listening, that if you want to learn more about me, Jim O'Connell, I still stutter over that. Like, am I a candidate or what? I don't know. But if you do, you can go on to, if you just Google Jim or O'Connell at Large or Jim O'Connell at Large. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, they'll probably tell me the other 10 things we're on. We probably have a pigeon somewhere with a little thing rolled up in its leg. We're sending out flying messages somewhere. But our website will be is ready and ready to go live. And we're just going to stop. We got a caller coming in. Stop everything. Here we go. Hello, caller. Oh, we missed you. Call back. We have a couple of minutes.
Should be line 1, Jim.
Line 1. Let me try again. I might have cut him off. Hello. Have I got him there? Hello. No.
Okay.
There we go. I got it. All right. Thank you. Hi, good evening, caller. Sorry I messed that up there. Who do we have?
Oh, Jim O'Connell, how could you do that? Sandy Paradise.
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Fair. See, these kids should know it.
All right.
Class of 1955.
Class of 1955.
Anyway, get some good-looking kids there on your program.
You know, they're yeah. Well,
Anyway, it's been interesting. I only got the last 30 minutes, but I still have my Central shirt, believe it or not. It is still dark green. I gave one of them to Matthew and Laura. They went to Central.
All right.
Anyway, I just wanted to ask you or tell you I would be glad to hold, I would be privileged to hold a sign for you for at least 3 hours at Ward 8. That's in front of Memorial High School, okay?
Thank you.
Give me a call.
All right.
Let me know. My number is 603
Yeah, I can.
606
Yeah.
1682.
You got it.
So sometime before September, let me know. I'd be glad to hold your sign for at least 3 hours at Memorial High School.
All right.
That is Ward 8.
I appreciate that for.
606
Gotcha. 1682.
Okay?
All right, I'm down to
Thanks.
the wire. Thanks for calling in.
luck, guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. There's another wonderful lady, former public servant, a school board member in the city of Manchester, and again, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and it's the great thing about running for at large is that it's the whole city. So friends that I've had in various corners of the city have shown up. We need all the help we can get. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, running citywide is a significant task, especially for a neophyte like me, a newcomer. In other words. I'm working hard to make sure that we put our best foot forward, but I need all the assistance that I can get. And so if you go online and go to O'Connell at Large, you should be able to Google it there and find us and contact us. And our website will be up in the next day or so. And we'd love your help. Also, I want to say to the young people who are here tonight, I'm very grateful to you, and I think people watching this show will be impressed by the fact that you're here in the summertime on a Tuesday night, that you care enough about your city, that you are interested in the future and the future of our schools. You, Lily, as somebody who has graduated our schools, you could be, kicking the dust off your feet and saying, "I'm out of here. Thank you very much, and it's great that you're here." You guys, as seniors who've gone through the system, thank you for being here. I'd like to recognize a couple of people in the background. We have. I don't know if you guys can. They're busy doing work over there. But Anastasia, your last name is. Yeah. Sastry. Okay, well, thank you for being here. She's busy working on the cameras, so she's there. We have Jake Leonard, who's sort of in command over there in the console. I dragged one of my 4 kids here. Molly's here, and she's just witnessing everything, making sure we're all behaving ourselves. And I'm very grateful. Also, we have my fiscal agent, to who I'm dearly indebted and grateful. John Bisson has been here as well tonight. Thank you, John, for being here. We do have a group. We met with some young people last night, and not all of whom could be here, but I really like the voices and action of young people in this program here. So if you'd like to affect change, we've lots of work to do. On electronically, social media, and physically going out and doing stuff, but mostly bringing your thoughts and ideas. You're very, very welcome. I am looking forward with great excitement to the campaign and to running for the school board in Manchester. Little did I think that this is where I would find myself at this point. But now I'm excited to do it. I think there are a lot of great things happening in our city, and I'm looking forward to representing that excitement, that vision for the future, and drive to go forward. So thank you all very, very much. It was a pleasure to have you here. Perhaps we'll do it again. And ladies and gentlemen, good night, and thank you for watching Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. All the best now. Bye.